Welcome to the Why Not You podcast, where our goal is to inspire, teach, and elevate your personal journey. Our heart-centered guests love sharing some of their life-changing aha moments, hoping that it might be of benefit to you. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our show. As a bit of an introduction, I'll give you a 30,000-foot view of Ryan, and then we will dig in and get to know him a little bit more. For over 25 years, he's worked with thousands of entrepreneurs and leaders across the United States, assisting them in growing their influence and their profitability. He's given hundreds of keynote speeches on leadership, team building, high performance, entrepreneurship, and politics. Ryan's also been featured on TEDx and authored 5 books. The last book that Ryan co-authored, titled Think Big, is an international bestseller, achieving 25 number one categories on Amazon. Ryan, welcome, and thanks for sharing a little bit of time with us today.
Glade, thanks for having me on. Pleasure to be here.
Well, Ryan, let's get to know you a little bit more. Take a few minutes and tell us a little bit about where you grew up and what it was like at the Chamberlin household.
Well, I grew up in a little town called Stockbridge, Georgia. It's in Henry County, Georgia. It's in Stockbridge. I live in Florida now. And matter of fact, I just was reading the other day where Shaquille O'Neal now is part of the sheriff's department there. I guess he's part of the sheriff's department in a half a dozen counties and cities. But the town I grew up in, he's part of that police force there. But, Henry County was a great town for me, first 10 years of my life, basically my elementary years. I have a younger brother, older sister, and spent time doing things that kids do. Now, my dad was involved in political things when I was a young man. And so I was around that, some of those types of people growing up. We'll get to that. But, growing up was great. I live now in Florida. We moved here, and I've been here in the town that I live, Bellevue, Florida, for 30 plus years. I've been married 28 years. I have 4 sons, so 3 adults, and my youngest just graduated high school. So we kept trying for a girl. That's how you end up with 4 boys, I guess. And the household in the Chamberlin, it's now they're starting to move out, but there was a time there for many years where if there wasn't a noise happening in the house, there was something going wrong. So we had to make sure we knew what was going on around here all the time, but had a lot of fun and still having fun today.
Well, that's cool. I understand that trying for a girl, but mine was the fact that I tried for a boy and I had 4 girls. So we're similar in that regard. But what was it like with, the politics thing? How did that had to have a huge impact on the direction of your life and people you met? And I mean, what type of politics was he involved in?
I think at that age, the first 10 years of my life, my parents were involved in many things, managing campaigns. My dad served 2 terms in the Georgia House. And as a little boy, I didn't really know the people other than I look back and I see, pictures of me and Newt Gingrich, pictures of me and, hanging out with gubernatorial candidates. But at that time, I didn't, I didn't think anything of it. But what I can think of now is the events and the people that I hung out with and the conversations we had at the table. Those are formative years. Right now in politics, we're hearing about, what some aspects of society thinks kids should be hearing and learning. And there's a big argument about that. And I don't know what the argument's all about. I know what it's about. I don't know why we're having it necessarily. It doesn't make sense to me. But nevertheless, those are formative years for kids. And what they grow up around does have an impact on them for the rest of their life. And so it certainly did for me. I didn't know what I would or wouldn't do. I chose to be an entrepreneur. And later in my life, I'm now getting more involved in political things. But yeah, I think it gave me a respect for the people. I realized that there are people in those positions, the right kind of people elected in those positions have a very positive impact on society. And I guess the opposite of that is the wrong kind of people elected those positions can have a negative impact on society. And I grew up respecting that and certainly in the back of my mind wanted to be someone of influence that could help a lot of people.
Was there anyone in particular that had a powerful impact on you at that early age?
No one that I well, a lot of people that I met, but I think that I grew up in the Reagan era, and Ronald Reagan was a topic in my house the whole, from like 5 years old to 15. I was around that 8-year period. So when I think of respecting the Oval Office, I think of Ronald Reagan. And that's the conversation that I was a part of. And part of that was unique because my father served 2 terms as a Democrat in the House. And he made a move during the Reagan era to the more conservative side of things. And so there was a lot of those conversations that happened. So that's who I would go to if I was thinking of the 1980s when I was a young man growing up. That's, from a political standpoint, that had an impact on me.
Well, I can't imagine not having an impact on you, having those conversations and hearing those things. I mean, that's powerful. So, Ryan, how did you said you chose entrepreneurship, entrepreneurialism at a pretty early age and not politics. How did you get led into entrepreneurialism?
Well, I think it was a part of my nature, I guess, somewhat of my family. There's been some entrepreneurs, grandparents, and, so I was raised a little bit around it. But what I was really raised around and the idea of freedom and entrepreneurism, that is what it's built on. And so I wasn't afraid and I'm not against, having a job. I had a few of them myself as a young man. But I wanted to have more freedom. And the people I was spending time with owned businesses and I didn't. So I gravitated toward wanting to, be able to control my own outcome and own destiny. And I didn't succeed very well in the first couple of businesses that I owned. However, I view them as huge successes because I learned some valuable lessons that have served me for the last 30 years now as an adult. And so, matter of fact, I taught a lesson last night on biblical entrepreneurship. And the way we view our failures in business often can dictate the future of our success because, if we fail in a business and we learn a bunch of things not to do, and then our next run in business, we have a lot of success in it. What do we really give credit to? Do we give credit to the fact that we all of a sudden, just decided to have success? Or do we need to go ahead and give some credit to the failure that allowed that success to come about? And so the way we view that, certainly impressing on and the principles of entrepreneurship, which I believe are the same principles our country was founded on, really permeate freedom. And I like to talk about those things. I like to be a part of those things. And certainly I love the country that we're in. The American dream is the American dream. People come from all over the world to participate in the American dream, which starts with what that really means to most people is they're coming here to start a business. They're coming here to do things they can't do where they're at. There's no such thing as a Canadian dream. There's no such thing as a Chinese dream. I'm not mad or negative on other countries, by the way. I love traveling, love history, and respect what they do. But there is such a thing as an American dream, and it really is based on entrepreneurism, and I love being in the middle of that.
Well, let's talk a little bit about some of the failures, because I think that's what people avoid most of the time. That hurts. And I've had my fair share of those things as well. But it is through the adversity and the challenge that we learn the most. Can you talk a little bit about some of the challenges, some of the hurts, some of the pains, and how you pulled yourself out of that?
Well, yeah, I certainly can. I think that the things, and these are the things that a lot of entrepreneurs don't talk about, or they don't, there's not the right kind of training that's just out there for everyone. But if I was just getting raw with you, I would talk about, early business decisions of, taking on debt in my company that didn't really need to be taken on and creating frustrations because of that debt, relational issues that come out of things that, really decisions that weren't really needed to be made, but they just so happened to be made by me, and they were wrong decisions, and they cost me years of frustration of digging myself out of that. Not a lot of people want to talk about the challenges that are created for entrepreneurs regarding their marriage, regarding their family, regarding the decisions they have to make to succeed in those areas. If you're going to be married 28 years, like I have, there's things you have to figure out, like control during that in business. We don't talk about marriage problems when you're dealing with entrepreneurism. And of course, marriages are tough in general anyway. You just look at the stats in the US. You add a whole dimension of stress that goes with owning businesses. You have to learn how to get good. You have to get good at dealing with those things, or you're going to have challenges in those areas. And again, I'm not picking on anyone. Everybody has their own situations. But you're asking me what challenges I dealt with. I had to learn some things to be able to stay married. I had to deal with some things from an entrepreneurial standpoint with those things, raising kids that are entrepreneurs. And, sometimes people get in business because they want to have freedom, yet they spend, 90 hours a week working. So they're not spending any time with their family. So these are balances. These are things that are on the personal side that affect us all, and they're things we have to work through. Struggles in business, partnerships are marriages inside of a business, and picking who you're going to be partnered with, who you're going to listen to. Probably the number one decision an entrepreneur is going to make in this life especially is, who am I going to pay attention to and who am I going to listen to? Who am I going to get my advice from? Because taking your advice from the wrong people leads to some, different forks in the road and different paths that we take. So those are the high level ideas that I think also translate into my political views, in deciding what your values are, setting your goals based on your values, staying true to those values, and not letting people push you outside of what your belief system is. And I just think there's a lot of trouble that's created when people make decisions that aren't in alignment with who they know they are.
Well, those are deep principles, Ryan, that most people don't think about in their early 20s, late 20s or whatever, when they're getting married and making career choices. Was there someone that was really helpful to you? Was it in your home, or was it in your church, or was it in those political conversations that were going on in your household? I mean, where did you get those values that obviously are so critical to you?
Well, a little bit of everything. And great question. I mean, I think certainly I'm blessed with the upbringing that I'd had. Not everybody has a great upbringing. And I feel like I did. When I look back on my childhood, I had a great time. And so I'm very fortunate there. I'm also very fortunate that I am a part of a great church and a great organization. And that's a benefit that, people don't think about when they're thinking about whether or not they should attend church or not. I know we all have ways of thinking about that, but that community aspect of church and the leadership aspect of church and the principle teaching aspect of church certainly is valuable when you hear that week in and week out, year after year after year after year after year. If you're paying attention, it's going to affect you. I think some of the businesses that I chose early on as a young man exposed me to some teaching and training and some mentors, people that were older than me, recommending a few books to me, which I was not a reader. I did go to college for a few years. I graduated magna cum laude, and it took me 4 years to get my 2-year degree. So it wasn't a great educational experience from that standpoint. But, outside of that, my education has come from, the books I've read and the people I've associated with, and of course the projects that I've been a part of, and choosing those projects, as wisely as I can. So I think all of that crafts who we are, the values we are. And here's the good news, Glade. I did start younger than most, had some successes younger than most, but it's okay to start at 40 and it's okay to start at 50. If you haven't had a whole lot of whatever success under your belt up to then, really it's the mindset shift that I like to help people get. And they can begin today on a new path forward in a relatively short period of time. See, society will react to people that are on a path to, bettering themselves. And especially in this marketplace today, one of the things I taught last night is, if you want to stand out as an entrepreneur in 2022, just do what you say you're going to do. That principle alone is going to cause you to stand out, in the marketplace. And then, of course, continuing to over deliver, under promise, and those types of things.
I love the mindset part of what you said. And part of what this podcast is all about are the three principles of mindset, vision, and habits. What I've learned is if you build your life on those, having a vision, having a purpose, having a why, having goals, those types of things, that gets you up in the morning. And the mindset thing, you can change. Your mind is the most dominant thing that we have. I mean, it's the only thing that we do have control over. And so, you can create that mindset. And I love that you talked about that. And then the habits. I've learned you can't accomplish anything unless you do it. And that you put in the work, like you said, just do what you say you're going to do. I mean, it sounds simple, and it is, but it's difficult. It's hard. One of our mentors, Jim Rohn, said, who you spend time with matters. And you've alluded to that several times today. And so I'd like you to elaborate a little bit more on that and then just, go from there.
Well, it makes sense to everybody when they hear it, but most people don't quite think about it as deep as they need to. It is an important decision. Here's really what I think happens is who you spend time with is really your accountability system in life. Meaning you're not going to be accountable to someone you're not spending time with. And probably the 4 or 5 people you spend time with, their belief system, their level of success, how they view life, that's going to give you permission to say yes or no to things because you're going to receive acceptance from that inner circle of people that you're spending time with. And that really becomes your accountability partnership program. And so spending time with people that are striving for the next, they're striving for goals, they're trying to be better. If that's who you're spending time with, then you're going to be uncomfortable if you're not striving for the similar things. And if they're not striving for anything, you're certainly not going to be uncomfortable by not striving for anything. So it kind of is a barometer for how you act day in and day out. And, people like to avoid accountability. So it's easier to spend time with people that don't cause us to stretch ourselves. And so when I think of spending time with people, I really think of spending time with people that maybe I can offer some things to them to help stretch them, but they certainly can offer things to help stretch me. And the conversations we have are not, around the latest sitcom that just came out yesterday, although that might happen every once in a while. That conversation may come up, but it's really about what's going on. What are we doing next? What did we learn this week? And conversations create that relationship, and that relationship creates accountability. And that's what I think it means that you become the 5 people you associate yourself with. And that's why I think that, if you're a person that has a net worth of $100,000 and you're hanging out with people that have a net worth of a few million, it won't be long before yours will start to creep up because of the checks and in the conversations you're having. Those checks and balances will start to help craft your thinking. So that's my take on it.
Well, I don't think it's very easy to have deep and meaningful relationship with 10,000 people, because you've got 10,000 likes or whatever. And so you've mentioned 4 or 5 people, and that was, oddly enough, that was the same number that I was told decades ago. The 5 people that you spend time with, the most time with, your net worth will be the sum total of those 5 people. It was told in a little bit different way, but it's so true. Who you spend time with matters. And so if you're not really happy with where you're at, you're going to have to make some tough choices and spend time with those who matter.
It doesn't mean you stop spending time with your family. It doesn't mean any of that. It doesn't mean any of that. But there's additional relationships that we find ourselves in throughout the day. And really what a father's role, in my opinion, should be is that father is growing. He should be helping his children grow in their thinking and their actions. So that requires its own set of conversations. And in that case, you're helping pull your children up to some new levels of thinking. And anyway, we could go on and on this one.
Exactly.
It's really a powerful principle.
Ryan, you are a very passionate person, and it comes through. And I love your passion for the freedom thing. That's been a constant theme in your discussion here today. How do we as entrepreneurs, Americans, and normal human beings rise above and grow from those adversities that we talked about a little bit today? What's been your experience there?
Well, I think that certainly we can grow from adversity a number of ways. One is we want to evaluate, what was a mistake that we could have controlled and what was a mistake that was out of our control. Sometimes we're dealing with things that are out of our control and we view that as adversity, and I guess it is. But, you're limited on what you can do. And as entrepreneurs, beginning to focus on things that are in our control, the habits that we have, the things that we do daily. This can apply to all areas of life, of course. And so when I think of adversity, I think what we can do, if we go through a really troubling time, we can go back to the basics. We can really clarify our vision of what the end result is that we want. We can really figure out, is this the path that's going to create the lifestyle? And we got to go back and ask the basic questions about the goals that we had and whether or not the goals were in alignment with our value system or not, or if we're just chasing after money when in fact we want other things. So I think as an entrepreneur, every time we have adversity, it's an opportunity to learn, reset new goals, and to evaluate the things we've talked about on this podcast. Who am I spending time with? Who are new relationships that I need to spend time with? And that's really all you can do. To get overly depressed about it more than 24 hours doesn't serve us very well, although, that's easier said than done. It's to, take a few days or whatever if you've had a major thing that you've had to overcome. But really, life rewards action, not intention. So we can't intend to do better. We have to take action to do better. And so thinking about it wears people out. It goes back to really the basics. And I think most people listening to this probably know the basics. We just have to be snapped out of whatever frustration we're in the middle of to get back to them and keep pressing on and moving forward. So that would be my initial answer on the adversity question.
Well, thank you, Ryan. Tell us quickly about the True Patriot Network.
Well, TPN was birthed out of, some frustrations. In 2020, I ran for U.S. Congress, and it was a big race. It was actually the most competitive race in the state of Florida. So it's my first time ever running for anything politically. Ever, I had supported candidates throughout my life, but had never thrown my hat in the ring. And, I'd come to a situation in my business life where at the end of 25 years of engaging in some businesses, I was able to exit those businesses. And that opened an opportunity of timing for me. And there was a seat that opened up for me to run for U.S. Congress here in my area. And up until the day of the election, we were playing to win. We thought we might, but we didn't. And we have continued, though, however, since that race launched in 2020, we've continued to have more aggressive conversations on how we can, be a part of the solution rather than just talk about the problems that are happening. And that's where TPN was birthed. Somewhere in the middle of the 2020 election cycle, we started seeing social media platforms, use the influence that really society had given them to start controlling the narrative a little bit more than I think most people wanted them to. Very powerful people started getting kicked off platforms because of things they were saying. And if they were in disagreement with the values or the ownership of that platform. So these types of conversations came up. And so a few months after my campaign, an opportunity arose for me to co-found, and now I'm the CEO of a platform called TPN, which stands for True Patriot Network. But TPN is an alternative to Facebook, an alternative. And I'm not I don't hate the other platforms at all, but they all are value-driven platforms. It's just some of those values are not in alignment with what a conservative value system, certainly a Christian conservative value system, would want long-term. And when you see the impact that social media has on, we talked about the 5 people you spend the most time with. Well, the next generation is spending a lot of time surfing and seeing opinions on these types of topics, moral topics, political topics, religious topics, you name it. That is where the conversations are happening. So I think the world is at a point now where they realize that social media is such a powerful means of helping craft the value system and the belief system of an entire generation. And so TPN was birthed out of the necessity of being a platform that could create more of an American value, not a conspiracy theory platform, but values that I think that you and I would be more proud of being discussed than just, some CEO saying we're not going to allow this, we are going to allow this, and it being tied to a specific opinion. So our tagline is where all voices are heard, whether I agree with them or not, they're allowed to be heard unless it's, extremely violent threats or things like that we know are not legal. Illegal conversations are not going to happen on the platform, but opinionated conversations can. And that's what TPN is all about. Just getting launched. We've been a year in beta, and we're now launching in 2022 out of beta, and we've got some really cool things happening. I believe there will be millions of people utilizing this platform in the next few years.
Well, that's awesome. And thank you for what you're doing there. That's amazing. It is true that the social media platforms are not going away, and there are definitely agendas more than principles being taught, I believe, in the social media platforms. So again, thank you for that. Well, Ryan, it's been interesting, and I hope that our listeners have gleaned a lot of the wisdom of the words that you've been saying and the principles and concepts that you've shared with us today. I know you've done a lot of keynote speeches, written 5 books. How do people get a hold of Ryan Chamberlin?
Well, the best way is go to ryanchamberlin.com. My last name is spelled Chamberlin. So ryanchamberlin.com. You can go there. Matter of fact, the most recent book, Think Big, is available there, and you can download. I actually recorded an audio chapter. I'm giving it away for free right there. Check it out. You'll hear the chapter I contributed in that book. It's a collaborative book, talks about 5 questions for a great America. And the question I raise is, could entrepreneurism, be a solution to some of America's biggest problems? And I believe it can, not because you have to go out and start a business, but because entrepreneurism's built on a certain set of principles and values. And if we think and we make decisions through those lenses, through those values, we tend to have a different conversation in this country than some of what we're having today. So there's a certain thought process that entrepreneurs, and it doesn't matter to me which political side of the spectrum you're on. What matters to me is that I care about talking about is more about values, use principle over politics. That's something you hear me talk about a lot, meaning I'm not really a big party guy, although, I am part of a party, but I'm not really a big party guy when it comes to politics. I want to talk about the issues, and I think that's where we've got to get back to. So grab that chapter, go to ryanchamberlin.com. You'll also see a button there for TPN. TPN is an invitation-only platform, so you have to be invited by somebody to go, and you can go to gettpn.net. That's tied to my personal invitation link. Or just go to ryanchamberlin.com, and you'll see where you can register for TPN there, and know that everybody that's on that platform wants to be there because somebody else invited them to be there. And I invite you, if you're listening to this, to participate as well.
Well, thank you very much. And Ryan, thank you for being with us today. And you're an interesting guy, and we wish you all the very best going forward.
Glade, thanks for having me on. Sure appreciate it.
We'd like to thank our guests for sharing a part of their experience with us on this episode of Why Not You? Also, we'd like to thank Mix It 6 Studios for producing, editing, mixing, and creating our great music for this podcast. But most importantly, we'd like to thank you for listening. Be sure to leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Also, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss our next episode of Why Not You? See you next time.